stands for Advancing the European Multilingual Experience. This is a research project that aims to raise awareness of multilingualism among policymakers, health professionals, academics, and educators. It is a 5-year collaborative research project studying multilingualism in Europe with partner institutions across 8 European countries.
Yeah, so our theme is obviously, there's a lot of us, 17 different institutions across Europe, and I'm working as a PhD in the Edinburgh branch. At the moment I'm looking at Mandarin English bilinguals, so people who have grown up in China and come over to the UK. The reason that I'm interested in looking at this is because there's a difference between knowing versus naming for real world objects. So when we look at an object and we say, okay, it's a bowl or it's a plate, there's actually a difference between how we think about those objects perceptually without any language compared to how we look at them when we say, I need to put my label on that for my language, and how I need to name that object. From China, America, or the UK, you do it similarly. It's only when we actually apply language to that people become different. So there's this weird intersection between culture and language, and that's what I want to look at. So if you imagine that bilinguals might have two sort of conflicting systems. So if you're a Mandarin speaker, you only use maybe 5 labels for these strange dishware items. If you're a English speaker, you use more labels. If you're an Argentinian Spanish speaker, you use even more labels than that. Now, if you're bilingual, how do the two things come together? Because you've got Mandarin English, and those two systems don't necessarily fit. So I look at what happens to the bilingual in those situations. And what we found in this experimental research is that, actually bilingual children tend to show a bit of an advantage in being able to sort of mask their own egocentric representation and think about what the other person sees. Well, obviously this kind of correlates with perspective taking in real life. What we think is happening there is that if you have this kind of linguistic knowledge that the world can be represented in different ways, this meta-linguistic awareness, then you understand that there are sort of multiple ways to see the world. And this, for some reason, kind of expands over to this like general idea of perspective taking, and that's why we think we see differences between bilinguals and monolinguals even in children. The thing about the reason why we're so interested in this kind of linguistic differences is that there are these sort of domain general effects, as we call them. So you're doing something very linguistic by being a bilingual, that kind of those changes that happen in the brain because you're holding 2 languages in your mind constantly seems very linguistic, but then the effects that you actually get stem over to very other areas of cognition, like perspective taking. So of course you're using language when you're talking to the other person in the experiment, but the actual sort of ability of suppressing your viewpoint and taking into account their viewpoint doesn't seem that linguistic. But this is the interesting thing about language. It seems to really affect kind of lots of areas of cognition.